Welcome to the Hustle and Flow podcast.
A platform we use to explore varying perspectives and opinion through candid conversation.
We chat about philosophy, business, and all things life. I'm Shaun the Hustle.
And I'm Les the Flow.
Let's go. All right, guys. So today we have a guest on the show. And our guest today is no stranger to the hustle. At a young age, he made his way overseas to pursue a career as a professional athlete. But when that dream didn't eventuate, he found himself back home in Australia, faced with an ultimatum: study or find a job. He chose the latter and soon after found himself on a car yard cleaning cars. His ambitions, however, continued to burn bright, and after having enough of freezing his hands in the cold of winter, he decided to dip his feet instead into the world of door-to-door sales, facing total strangers and their rejection on a continual daily basis. During this time, he also started a small business with his brother, and shortly after made the move to a different startup where he decided to give it his all. Unfortunately, though, he was met yet again with disappointment when the company he was working so hard to help build actually folded. Finding himself at another crossroad, he experienced a chance encounter from which he sees an opportunity, heading down an unfamiliar path in a completely new industry. With no prior experience in the field, he decided to place one foot in front of the other and venture into what was for him a new world. Fast forward to the present day, and he appears on the leaderboard of a worldwide organization at which he is now shaping a very successful career. Refusing to take no for an answer when it comes to his ambitions, he has cultivated the ability to pivot and keeps the flame of his drive and determination burning bright, placing him square on the path to achieving his dreams and building a life that he is proud of. With that, I would like to welcome here today, Josh Putland.
Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate that introduction as well, Shaun. Very, very nice introduction. Thank you guys for having me once again.
No worries, man. Thanks for joining us. And yeah, like you said, that's some introduction there. And Shaun's already told us a little bit about you, mate. But we'd love for you to give us a bit more of a detailed rundown as to what the origin story of Josh is and what made him the man he is today. So, floor's yours, man.
Yeah, for sure. I suppose a lot of my success I have to attribute to my parents. A lot of my makeup comes to what they taught myself and my brother, and I suppose I'll start my story with them. So my mother's Indian, and my father is Australian Scottish. So you're probably thinking, how does that work? Where did they meet? So both of my parents are very strong Christians, very strong believers, and my father actually went on a missionary trip to India. That's how we met my mother. So in 1993 they both got married. In '94 I was born, and yeah, I spent a good part of my life in India. So I grew up in India from 3 till 7, and then we came to Australia. So yeah, I would say, I learned a lot from my culture in India, and my parents had a lot to do with how my brother and myself live our lives. So yeah.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for that, man. And it's an interesting place to start from. So I guess tell me a little bit more about your parents' influence and how you think they sort of set the foundation for the man you are today. And I think it's an interesting thread to come from in terms of your upbringing in India and perhaps the cultural comparison to Australia, where you are now.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's a few things. Everybody will have a different opinion on what it takes to, I guess, be successful in your art. But the common things people will refer to as discipline, and we learned that from a very young age. If you look at Indian culture and you look at academics, for example, and how competitive that landscape looks like, I got to experience that firsthand when I went to school there. So my mother was actually a teacher on the missionary campus we grew up on, in a village, and my father was he was teaching theology, which is the Bible basically. So their teachings involved a lot of discipline, and the way we lived involved a lot of discipline as well. It's hard to grow up within a missionary family, and we grew up in South India. So my mother's from the south, and my dad is very fair skinned, is very light. So he had his own challenges, and we as a family had our own challenges. So we learned a lot through those experiences. It's not normal, I would say, for kids to grow up in an environment like that, and grow up with um, such diverse upbringings. Coming from India to here, we took different parts and different elements. But back to your original question with my parents and their influence, my dad. If I start with my dad, I mean, he gave up Western luxury, I would say. The lives we live here, it is luxurious. A lot of people don't live the way we do. A lot of people don't have the privileges we have. And my dad dropped that, for his faith, and for my mother as well. He dropped that for his faith, for my mother, and for his boys, for his kids. So they set the groundwork, and they set the example from get go. So when I look back at the way we grew up and what they sacrificed and what they did for us, it shouldn't be hard for us to be able to, make an impact in the world we live in today, in this Western world that they sacrificed for us to, have some sort of opportunity. And so yeah, major influence, my parents.
Totally, man. Totally get you. And I guess Shaun and I have spoken about this a little bit on the pod every now and then in terms of, I guess, our parents' influence on each of us. And I guess it's a little bit different with you because I guess Shaun and I will talk about it in terms of a reflection back on the hardships of the prior generation. But I guess you had a taste of it at a younger age, being brought up in growing up in India for the first 7 years of your life. So that would have been, your firsthand experience, which is something that, I'm sure shaped, the person who you are and your perspective on things in coming to the Western world, as you said, with this very clear understanding of the luxuries and, accessibility around us, and the abundance that we have access to. So yeah, it's very interesting to look at that in terms of what culture teaches us, and the diversity there. I want to go back and touch on something in terms of your father's profession or his teaching in theology, and I want to ask whether that had any sort of influence on you as an individual in terms of that spiritual element.
Yeah, it definitely did. So the fact that we grew up in a missionary campus, we as kids we saw a lot of struggle because people from the village and people from hardship would come to the campus or the base that we were um, located at, and they would seek help from people like my father and my mother. So what it taught me was hope and faith, and that's something that is required when things get tough. But tough here versus tough there are two completely different things, as I said. But yeah, it definitely taught me, like, you know hope, having hope and having belief in something bigger and greater than you. That's what it taught me.
Yeah, cool. And do you have still a strong, I guess, relationship with religion and spirituality today?
Yeah, I would say so. Probably not as strong as my parents, but I definitely believe that there's a higher being. I believe in God, and um, yeah, I would say I'd be silly not to. It was a big part of my life growing up. And my parents actually pursued an avenue in starting a church here when we came to Australia after their missionary work in India. So it was a big part of my life, big part of my family's life, really. Yeah, still is, still is.
And I guess I've known you for a while now, Josh. Like for the listeners, and we have some pretty deep conversations, which I really enjoy. And I know that hope and faith are things that you hold dear, and present in your life, and have done so throughout your life, different times and periods of your life. One thing we've spoken about as well is you were 7 when you moved to Australia, so I think you were old enough to, really see, understand, and digest a lot of what, you experienced while living in India, and it's kind of shaped, or not shaped, but helped to shape your view of the world. And could you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, for sure. So coming from, I mean, the culture there and the way you grow up and the opportunities that are presented to you look completely different to the opportunities that are presented to you here in the Western world. So in terms of perspective and moving forward and pursuing opportunities, I suppose I've looked at things differently to uh, the person next to me, just given my experiences. So, for example, in India, I went to school with kids that didn't wear shoes. There were kids that didn't wear shoes because they couldn't afford to wear shoes. These are things that people here can't comprehend. It's a pair of shoes. This should be like a common. This is a common item that you have. That's the first example that comes to mind. And those little instances, which I would have had hundreds of in India, is what helped shape my perspective. And I think that when I came here, I leveraged that perspective, to better myself and to pursue any opportunity that came my way. So, as you mentioned in my introduction, cleaning cars. There's a funny story behind that. My mother actually got me that job. So it's my brother actually bought a car from Mitsubishi at the time, but she negotiated that he'll buy the car if they gave me a job. I didn't have a job, and for most people, I'm sure like that's a job that you wouldn't want to necessarily do. Like I'd rather be in Woolworths, or I'd rather work at Big W. I'm a 20-year-old and I'm just trying to make $1. And the pay was ridiculously low. And I still remember, in the winter, I would carry around a hot water bucket because I would have to clean the cars in the morning at 6:30, 6 o'clock, 6:30. Step outside now at 6 a.m. and tell me what you feel. And now start washing a car and tell me what you feel. That's what I used to do. And like back to your original question with perspective, I would go after it. It was an opportunity for me. It was an opportunity for me to learn. It was an opportunity for me to earn and grow as an individual. I didn't like doing those things. I'm not going to say I did. I didn't like getting up early. I didn't like working Saturdays, sometimes Saturday mornings, to earn a little bit more. But I knew that these things are going to make me better. These things are going to help me grow. So from a perspective point of view, I think growing up in India and having that cultural experience, and going to school with kids that didn't have shoes, this was still a privilege. This was still luxury. I had steel cap boots. I have a high vis shirt. I got a jumper. I got a hoodie. I can do all that. I can afford it. So yeah.
That's crazy, man. Like, and it really shows the power, the teaching power, the lessons that come with, simply experiencing something. And, that's the powerful imagery that I get when you describe, seeing your fellow classmates without shoes. There's so many, uplifting quotes and things like that that you can find anywhere that anyone can read. But it is very different to reading something and intellectualizing it and understanding it versus actually living it and experiencing it and taking those lessons firsthand. So thanks for sharing that, and that's super powerful. What I want to go back to is I want you to tell me a bit more about, I guess, your schooling life here, and then also that leading up to your pursuit of, I guess, a professional athletic career. I think that there'll be an interesting thread to sort of follow down.
Yeah, definitely. So when I came here to Australia at 7, the curriculum in India is that you start school at like 3 years old, which I did. So I started going to school. I started spelling words like hippopotamus by the time I was 4 or 5 years old. You know, pretty proficient in my multiplication by the time I was 6. It's very it's very rigid over there. The system, it's, you know, you get taught quite a bit at a young age. So when we came here, my mother actually tried to put me into 3rd grade. She argued, and well, she didn't argue, but she debated that you know, I had the intellectual capacity to actually go into 3rd grade, even though I was 2 years too young. So I went into 2nd grade, and then worked my way up. I grew up in Campbelltown, so I started at Campbelltown East, and when I moved schools. So one thing with Campbelltown East, it was actually quite rough for me. It's developing now, but back when I came to Australia, you know, it was a very low socioeconomic status type area. So bullying and racism and things like that were very real, and I had a tough time personally myself. So my parents, you know, made the sacrifice to spend a little bit more and send us to a Catholic school. So when I was enrolled into that school, I actually started playing sports to make friends. That was the reason why I started playing basketball. It was never because I enjoyed it. It wasn't something that I thought, wow, this is amazing. No, I wanted to make friends. And I saw people that I thought I could get along with in the park shooting hoops during lunchtime. So that's actually why I started playing sports. So fast track a little bit into high school. I carried on with that. I used that as, I suppose, my identity card, to make more friends, and, you know, to I guess feel a sense of belonging. So yeah, that's really when the journey started, I would say. When I started trying out for teams and trying to, you know, push for the high school team, push for, you know, representative teams in the area. That was really when I started to face adversity. So a key, I would say, a key event was when I was in the 8th grade and I trialed for the high school basketball team at John Terry, and I was actually cut, and I couldn't hold. I was very emotional because I really thought I was good enough to make the team, and all my friends made the team. I didn't make the team, so it actually wasn't about the game. It was the fact that my friends made the team, and I wasn't a part of that. I wasn't a part of what I wanted to be a part of. And I couldn't hold the emotion. So I remember sitting on the corner of the court and I just started crying. And I remember from that point on, I told myself that, you know, I'm going to do my best to prevent situations like this happening to me ever again. And for me, basketball was a big part of my life. It was most of my life at that stage. So, you know, I was telling myself, I'm not going to get cut. I'm going to keep playing. I'm going to keep training. You know, after school, I'm going to work on my game. You know, I started looking up jump programs and stuff, tried to build my body. And then the next year, I actually trialed for the regional representative team, MacArthur Heat, and I got cut again. And I actually, like, there was only like 23 that trialed, and 20 got picked. And I was one of the 3 that got cut. And I remember I walked up to the coach and I said, you know, are you sure you missed my name? Are you sure? And like people were looking too. So it was a very confronting sort of situation. Imagine, you know, a 13-year-old kid who's been training all summer, you know, and you walk up and you're thinking, no, there's got to be a mistake. Like, are you sure you didn't? And yeah. He said, no, I'm sorry, you didn't make the team. I was crying the whole night like a little baby. My mother was upset too, because, you know, a mother's love doesn't want to see his son upset. And that sparked, you know, some sort of fire. And again, it wasn't necessarily about the game. It was just, I don't know, I leveraged that moment. And those 2 moments I'd leveraged. I would say the previous one that I just mentioned to you, with the regional representative team, I held on to that, and I still carry that to this day, because I use it to propel forward. So fast forwarding from that, I ended up making the team the next year. I played for Macarthur Heat from about 13 till 17 years old. Then I left the area to play for Sutherland. After that, I went on a couple of stints to the US with a team for college recruitment. So I wanted to get into a college system over there. That didn't work out. Definitely a different breed of athletes over there. For any local athletes that are listening to this podcast, I would suggest go over there early and, get a feel for the competition, because they are bred differently over there. It's a different level of competition. There's more people competing, for the spot that you're after, and people come from harder circumstances than you do. So it's a different vibe when you step out on the court or in the field. But after that, it just didn't work out. There was a glimpse of an opportunity that, could have been like a part scholarship, but it still would have costed me, quite a bit of money. And there's no way my family could have funded that. I come from humble beginnings, to be quite honest. So there was no way I could have pursued that. So I came here and I played for the city of Sydney, Sydney Comets, and that was the last team that I played for. So they're like a feeder team for the Sydney Kings. So to come from, even though I didn't quite make it, per se, to come from not making a high school team to playing for the city and actually winning state championship title, and experiencing the game and making new friends and experiencing competition in the US it's something that I'll always speak about. The journey. It's always about the journey. It's because if you think about the end, then you're actually not learning. You're actually not paying attention. You're just focusing on one thing as opposed to everything that's happening. And I, following that, that's when I made the shift to start working, which was when I started cleaning cars.
Yeah. And, I do want to highlight that, like you said, the difficulty between, I guess, your situation and the contrast between yourself and, the athletes that you saw in the States. The difference is like that dedication and that lifelong, dedication and application to making those teams, right? That's the difference with a lot of those types of sports. And like, what I picked up from you, and you mentioned this a couple of times, mate, is that you didn't even do it for the love of the game. You did it because you wanted to make friends, and for you to be able to make it all that way without, like, the love of the game, spurring you forward. That's tremendous, man. That's tremendous. And like, I think I pick out that catalyst for yourself as, that driving factor for you again. And you've mentioned that as something that you hold dear even to today. No, but hats off, man, because like I myself, I know what it takes to get into rep locally. I made it to rep for Sutherland as well back in the day, but I never played because, like, again, the same thing. My parents come from, we're humble beginnings, and they simply did not have the time to, invest in taking me to practice and all that sort of thing. So I made it, but I never played. But that's the difference, right? Again, it's a different breed in terms of that level of dedication required to achieve at that high level. But like, again, I want to say that it's tremendous that you were able to, achieve what you did despite all the circumstances. So, hats off, man.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, man. And I want to pull one thing out in particular is, you said you took those moments when you didn't make the team, and now and what that meant for you, and you hold it dear. And one thing we always talk about in this podcast is how, there's no big moments, there's just moments, and then there's a meaning that we attach to them. And you did that. And, when you did that and you still hold it dear to yourself, it sounds to me like when things aren't going your way, you remember that moment because of the meaning that you attach to it, and it helps you to propel forward now.
Yep. I think that's key. I think if it's just about being conscious, really, of what you feel when you go through certain things, because everybody has moments. It's not like you live a life without any moment. Everybody has adversity. Everybody has moments. I think it's about consciously paying attention to those moments and figuring out what those moments mean to you. I'm quite an emotional person. I might not display it, but I'm quite an emotional person. So for me, it was hard to ignore it. I had to dive into what that actually meant. Um, and I learned, instead of uh, being defensive about it, I learned to actually use it and leverage it. So even when I was cleaning cars, even when I was door knocking, selling printers, even to this day, when I have tough days, I think about those things all the way back to India as well. When I first came to this country, when I had my own struggles, and I had quite a rich Indian accent, if you could believe, when I came to the country here. So um, yeah, kids pointed that kids can be cruel, and I still think of those moments. One moment that I always speak about to people close to me will know that there was a time when we're living in India at the time, and my parents took us out. I remember it was late in the evening, and the cars that you drive when you're a little kid, the little hop on, you can pedal them and drive them around the house and stuff. So we saw one in the window, and it was like the equivalent of 10 or 15 Australian dollars. And we looked at our parents. I was 6, my brother could have been 4. Um, we looked at them and said, "Can we have that?" I remember they just laughed, because it was just that this is not happening. There's no way we're gonna buy that. It's too expensive. We got other bills. Because my parents are missionaries at the time, right? We don't have finances. And I still think about that moment, and I would have been 5 or 6 years old, and I'm 26 now. So I feel like if you pay enough attention to certain moments in your life of adversity specifically, you can use that. And I still use it to this day. So the moments that I've mentioned in this podcast, each and every one I still think about, I would say every day or every second day for sure.
Yeah, awesome, man. Awesome. And like something I want to touch on, man, and I guess get you to, delve a little bit deeper with and share with the audience, mate, because a lot of the time, like Shaun and I, we've walked a similar path in terms of we've walked that conventional route that everyone is prescribed, go to school, do a bit of uni, and go to work, and then work up the ladder, of corporate or whatever. And then we've broken out of that and started our own businesses. But it seems like you've had the job, you've dabbled in a couple of businesses of your own, and now you're back. So walk us through that, man. I mean, I'd love to hear, I guess, your thought process behind that particular journey.
Right. Okay. So a big driver has always been for me money, because it's something that I never had, and my parents lacked. Because I mean, we always had food on the plate, and my parents did everything they could. But an example of not having money is when I went to the private school, when I transferred from the public system to the Catholic system, the Catholic schools. Um, you have to buy your shirts at their shop, at the school shop, and the emblem is on there. It's sewed on. We couldn't necessarily afford it. So I remember my mother actually went to Lowe's and got the same shirt. This is actually very creative or innovative now that I look back. But she bought the emblem on its own and bought the shirt independently and saved like $17. But I went to school and all the kids were looking at it like, what in the world are you wearing? That's an example of not really having money. And one of my biggest drivers is it's money. It's being able to be financially free. I don't need to be a billionaire. I don't need to have 100 million or anything like that. But I never want to have to worry about money again, because most of the instances I talk about of struggle may have been fixed if we just had a little bit more money. And my parents were very, very hardworking people. It's not that we relied on the system for checks or anything like that. My dad, he used to work overnight shifts. So the WD-40 cans, he actually used to work in a manufacturing plant when we first came to the country, and he would work from 9 p.m. to like 3 or 4 a.m. So hustle wasn't something my father or my mother lacked, and I learned that from them from a young age, as I've mentioned a few times now on this podcast. But that was one of my biggest driving factors. Finance. That's something I can control. That's something I can fix. You can earn that. You can. There is no limit in a country like this. You just have to find a platform or an avenue. And yeah, that's what led me to business, and starting a concept, building a culture around it, and delivering a service or a good that could benefit the rest of the economy. But I suppose in high school, because a lot of my time was consumed through sports, my grades were never good. So my ATAR was way low. It was like 48 or something like that. I've never said that out loud, so there you go.
I didn't know that, man.
Yeah, it was very low. So it's not because I was illiterate or anything. I just didn't put in the time. I did not care. I was just chasing the game.
Yeah.
And
it wasn't your priority at the time, right?
No, it wasn't. And coming from an Indian family, like that's a no-go. That's not good. But besides money, I think pursuing academics as well as, so let me backtrack a bit. So after the business, it didn't quite work out. As I said before, I'm somebody that just chases opportunity that comes at me, and finance and currency markets is what jumped at me at the time, and it was an opportunity. It was sort of like a crossroads in my life, and I jumped on that opportunity and just looked at it in a positive lens. And I knew that it was a privilege because there was other kids, that had degrees. They had Monash behind their name. They had Sydney University. They had all that. I didn't have anything. I just had my hustle, and I had my experience. So the fact that I've door knocked the city, the fact that I've cleaned cars, the fact that I worked in a startup company, the fact that I had my own business, these were things that spoke louder volume than education, which is the system. And I got into the company I work for without education per se. I had experience. I had sales experience. I had business experience, and I had heart. And those are the things that they're the things that's what you really need. You need heart. You need hustle. That's a given. And you can grow around that. There's other things that you need to learn that you can learn if you've got the hustle there. But pursuing academics now, so I'm studying economics now, I chose to do that because I realized I actually enjoy the financial markets. I enjoy the economy. I actually want to learn about what makes the economy. I want to understand how we build data. I want to understand how we interpret what we interpret. And then I want to make my own impact on the economy one day, for better and for greater good. How can we help businesses? For example, Australia, we don't export that much. We're not very independent that way inclined. How can we change that? How can we impact that? That's sort of where my mind started to go when I entered finance. But, before then, I didn't see any reason to study. And I feel like, when you go through the system, it's just like the next step that you have to take. Every step that you take has to have purpose. And this step had purpose, so it made sense for me to follow through. And the reason why I mentioned the ATAR, the ATAR that was so low for me, the course that I'm doing requires like a 93 ATAR. So because I'm older, because I have experience, and I actually started at Western Sydney University and averaged like a distinction to get across. It's possible if you have enough purpose. It really is. It's possible. I shouldn't be where I am, but I am. So I should. So, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. I sort of deviated a little bit.
That's cool, man. I think it gives us a really good insight into your approach, right? And how you approach things with purpose. And Les mentioned that he and I have walked these sort of conventional paths at the start of our careers, and then have moved on to our own businesses, whereas you've kind of done the reverse. But I think what's really important to highlight for people is to do what you want to do and to fulfill the purpose that you want to fulfill. This is a path that you've identified as being a good one to take. And right, like, it's very hard, I know, to deal in the financial markets doing your own thing, right? So
Yeah,
I just
for
want to
sure.
highlight that for people as well, because I think in this current environment and where we are right now in society, there's this shitting on the corporate world, right? And we talk about things that we didn't like about the corporate world as well, and things that we broke out of. But for everything that's negative about it, there's a shit ton of positives as well. It gives a lot of people opportunities to do things that, frankly, man, you wouldn't be able to do without being in that environment, having that structure around you, and the scale at which you're able to do things, right? So going from having your own business to the environment you're in now, right, which is a worldwide company. Could you talk a bit about that and what you've noticed and what that's delivered for you?
Yeah, so originally I wanted to pursue corporate after, so after Team Peasy, once we decided to, fold the business, I thought to myself, if I'm going to pursue this corporate life, I'm actually going to pay attention to what they do right and what they don't do right. And that's what I've been doing ever since I came back into the corporate world. Because prior to my current job and profession, it was just solely Team Peasy, because previous to that, I was actually made redundant. And that's what sort of forced me to run with the business and see where it takes us. And yeah, unfortunately, it didn't quite work out. But usually, the first business doesn't always work out anyway. It usually takes a few businesses and learnings, and then you find your groove. But that was the initial um, purpose of going back into corporate, to actually see how businesses are formed, how businesses are led at a much larger scale, um, and how businesses grow. How do you grow a business? Is it purely just sales, or are there cultural elements, or are there different stakeholders involved that have different responsibilities, and do those responsibilities change and transform as the business evolves? These are all questions that I didn't have answers to per se. You can go on YouTube, you can go on Google, but for me, I also needed to like earn an income at the time as well. So I thought, well, look, I need to earn, and I also need to learn as well. So that was the main reason for why I pursued that corporate life.
Yeah. And I think one thing that I want to highlight for people that you've done is, it's all in the doing. Like, to experience something and to work out the answers, the absolute best way to do it is to actually try it out. Because you can read about things, you can speak to people about it, but until you're actually in it, it's a very different perspective that you're going to form and have.
Yeah, for sure. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. And another thing that I've noticed, Josh, is that, it sounds to me like you've had a lot of false starts, and I don't say that in like any type of bad way. I think, so many people who walk a path to find their purpose and one that turns out to be successful for them have all these false starts. But a key factor is they move on from them really quickly. Because I know you and I know your story, I know that you've never been stuck in a certain place for too long. When something has worked out how you wanted it to turn out, you've pivoted and you've found a way to do that. So could you talk a bit more about that and your experience?
Yeah. After a while, it becomes instinctual. You have to fail to learn. It might sound corny or cliche because so many people talk about it, but it's true. you have to fall over, you have to fail time and time again. And then eventually you realize, well, I'm not afraid of that anymore, because I know that I'll just get back up. There's nothing else I can do. I can't just stay down. I can't just focus on the negatives. I have to get up. This has happened before. So that's what I mean by the fact that it does become instinctual after some time. Yeah, I was born into a family with immediate adversity, coming from separate culture, dad with Scottish Australian background, very fair, and my mother from India. I was born into adversity immediately. And the fact that they were missionaries, I learned from them from the get-go that it doesn't matter what people say or what people think, they're not paying your bills. You have to get up and you have to go after what you're trying to do in life. And that's what they did. My dad didn't have to live in India as a white-skinned man in a very dark populated village. He didn't have to do that. He was a target. We were a walking target everywhere we went as a family. But especially being missionaries, it's very difficult in India to be missionaries. You are a target. So when I look back all the way from there to my basketball days, school as well, the adversity that I faced in school, and then to today, I get up quicker, because all those moments and all those instances made me. It's made me get up quicker. You can't focus on one failure. You just need to learn from it, and you just need to keep going forward. It truly does become instinctual.
And I think that's just a really strong difference of perspective in terms of what quote unquote failure means to you, right? And it's just like that saying that is very popular. It's either you win or you learn. You don't lose ever, right? You win or you learn a lesson, and you use that to move forward. And I see that along a lot of people's journeys, and it's no different for you. And I want to point out something in terms of this conventional road as well, in terms of because Shaun highlighted, you're in a place that perhaps seems a little bit, it's different, right? It's backward in that it's people aspire to, be their own boss and own their own business, but you did that in reverse. But it's not necessarily a right or a wrong collectively. This is your path, as mine and Shaun is different to yours, and vice versa. And the interesting point here is, right, in terms of your results in high school, your lack of university degree coming into corporate, and now you choosing to further your tertiary studies. There's intention behind everything you're doing, and it's based on the priority at the time. I have a similar story in terms of my own schooling. I had a very similar result in high school. I jumped straight into a job. I went into corporate, and then I tried again to complete my university degree, and I did it for 2 years, and I deferred, and I never went back because I found the job that I wanted. I didn't need it anymore. It wasn't a priority. But the point is that, again, it's all about the experience that you're in at the moment, and what you're learning, and what you're deriving from that instance, right? Don't do things because it's seen to be quote unquote necessary if it doesn't help or further your journey, on the path that you're walking. And it's really key. It seems to me it's very different in terms of the way you've structured your journey, but you're doing things purposely. There's so much intention behind it, and it's clear. It's not just following a generic path. And I want to point that out for everyone.
Yeah, I think, yeah, definitely. I think there has to be a purpose with every step you take, regardless of what it looks like to everybody else. It's what it looks like to you, because that's what matters the most.
Totally.
And that's what will get you through. When it's dark, nobody else is watching. When it's 8 p.m., 8:30, 9 p.m., 11, whatever it may be, and when you're working on your craft, it has to matter to you, because nobody else is there with you.
Yeah. And how do you shut up that noise? Because we all hear it, right? We all hear that outside noise, and it's up to us what we choose to do with it, whether we let it affect us or not. And clearly, you're someone who chooses to walk to the beat of their own drum instead of listening to the rhythm of others. And how have you done that yourself?
I think because I tried to listen to it for so long and things weren't working, I realized, oh, maybe if I try something different and just kill all that and work on myself and stop listening to what other people have to say, because most of the time when people are speaking to you or about you, there's an agenda behind it. What if I just listen to myself and pursue what I'm trying to do and talk to people that are pure and that care, regardless of where they're from or what they look like? What does that look like? And when I started doing that, everything shifted. In fact, when I met my girlfriend, Darian, that was one person that truly wanted the best for me, and she was a big part of my trajectory, I have to say. So that would have been the first, besides my immediate family, that backed me and helped me to kill that noise. Because when you fall in love with someone, you're forced to pay attention to them. So when I listened, and when she listened more so, there was no other noise that was relevant. And I think that's when naturally my trajectory started to move in the right place.
Yeah, super key to point out, man. I mean, it's a common thing where we talk about your environment that you I guess associate yourself with, and how that impacts you and the way you operate. And your environment also includes the people that you surround yourself with as well, right? So that's a great example and a great point to point out for people, in that environment involves everything surrounding you, even the noise and the media that you choose to allow enter your frame of consciousness. All of that is included. So yeah.
I think with, just to quickly add, it's just about being conscious. So just like I mentioned before about multiple moments that you'll have in your life, and how you can use those moments that were times of adversity, how you can use those moments as leverage. It's simply about just being conscious of how that made you feel and how you can use that to propel yourself forward. And it's the same thing in terms of um, the energy that you let in, the music that you listen to. Listen to what's being said, because that's what's going in your mind. Be careful what you say, because that's what you're putting out into the open. Energy is a real thing, and the noise or the world. There is so much energy out there that is good and bad. So it's about being conscious and being selective around what you let into your life, because and that includes people that you surround yourself with as well. That would be one of the biggest elements, I would say.
Totally,
Yeah,
man.
Yeah. I really want to point out one word you used, which is selective. And I think, if you are conscious, being selective is a very, very important thing to be, an important way to be. Because if you essentially, by being selective, you're choosing which frequency you're going to tune into. And that's what you're going to be hearing all the time, right? And then also, based on what you take in, it's going to dictate what you put out, right?
Well, selectivity infers the power of choice. It returns the power of choice to you as an individual, and how you choose to, direct your time and who you surround yourself with. Like, choice is, like we always say in this podcast, right? It's like the one superpower that we each hold, in that we get to choose how we experience, this existence as individuals, right? We don't have to follow any sort of, standard path or any dictatorial script at all, and to really uphold and reclaim the power of choice is to be selective about every aspect of your life, and wield that power to pave your own path, essentially, right?
And it's a privilege to even have power of choice, considering other places in the world where you lack that. And that's why I used the word luxury previously in the Western world, because the life you live is literally what you make it. Everybody has their challenges, everybody has their hurdles, but ultimately, in the world, in the country, and the city that we live in, you make it. You can make it your own.
Totally.
Yeah, for sure, man. And another thing I just want to come back to is, you said you tried doing it the way that you were told and that other people told you, and it wasn't working out for you. So then you just decided to do what you want and do it your own way, right? And that's something that I can identify with as well, because it's so easy, man, especially when it's people that care about you. But regardless of who it is, generally when people are giving you quote unquote advice, it's based on their own context, their experiences, and what they want to see happen, right? And it's their plan. But like, what about your own plan?
Yeah.
Always think about that, and I talk to people about that, because I think it's so important to consider and be conscious of, right? People are telling you things based on their context, and it's not yours. So you have the choice to do what you want to do. As you said, especially being where we are in this city, in this environment, right? We all have that choice. And it's hard. It's hard, especially, when you've grown up with certain people, they've done a lot for you, or, it's someone who you really respect for whatever reason. And, we are affected by the expectations people have of us. But one lesson I learned, pretty recently, and it's from Nipsey Hussle, man, it's like, you can't put your expectations of me on me, right? And I think you've worked out a way to really embody that and walk your own path, and it seems to be working out for you. And that's what I really want to point out, is that you tried to do it the way you were told. And then when you became conscious about what you really wanted and that wasn't working out for you, you decide to walk your own path. And I bring that up just to encourage people to think about that and think about what you really want to do. Like, what is it that you want? And what path do you want to walk down? And what expectations do you want to form for yourself? And what type of life do you want to lead? And then start traveling down that road.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I think, as I said, your journey is what it means to you, not to the person next to you, because the person next to you isn't wearing the shoes that you got on your feet. So you have to own your journey. You have to own your passion, and that's the only way you will step forward, and create the life that you want to live. You have to have purpose behind every step. Otherwise, the steps get heavy, and you stop stepping forward.
Totally, man. Totally. I mean, to put it in an analogy, if our lives were a blank canvas and everyone else around you were using only black paint to paint a very straight line, it doesn't mean that you have to do the same. It doesn't mean you can't use color. It doesn't mean that you can't do squiggly lines to draw your path. You can do whatever the fuck you want, but it is your canvas to paint. And, perhaps a really beautiful way to close off the conversation. So just want to thank you for joining us today, Josh. Really appreciate you and sharing your story so candidly. I'll give you the floor in terms of putting it out there. How do people get in touch with you if they want to get in touch after this conversation?
Yeah, sure. First of all, I appreciate you guys having me on here. This is the first time I've actually been able to share my story, so on a public platform. So I appreciate this. But if anybody wanted to get in touch with me, I'll share my my Instagram tag. Perhaps when you share the podcast, I'll give you my tag, and if there was anybody that wanted to reach out, feel free to direct message me, and happy to have a chat.
Sounds good. We'll add your handle in the show notes, mate. And how about you, Shaun? Where can people reach you?
Yeah, best place to find me is on Instagram as well. So just Shaun_Coop. So it's SHAUN_COOP. you can get in touch with me there. And how about you, Les?
Yeah, you can get in touch through my website, findingspace.co, and also through Facebook and Instagram. The handle is also at findingspace.co. If you want to send Shaun and I an email regarding the podcast, any questions, queries, if you want to send something to Josh, if you want to jump on as a guest, anything at all, just get us on our email address, thehustleandflowpodcast@gmail.com.
And guys, as always, just a humble request, a little fee that we ask for in return for listening to the show. If you got something out of today, I learned more about Josh and some very interesting perspectives as well. More about how to actually form a perspective and move forward. If you got some nuggets out of today, which I'm sure you did, there's someone listening who, might enjoy this story, take something from it, please do share it. We're on iTunes, Spotify, and Stitcher. Also, if you've got some time, please leave us a review and rate the podcast. It helps us with getting this podcast out. Our aim is really to get these conversations in the ears of people and provoke some more thoughts and actions based on those. So until next time, guys, catch you then.
See you guys.